Hi, I'm Tony Russo, and this is In Case You Missed It from Kates-Boylston for the week ending Friday, May 3rd, 2024. Service Corporation International reported top-and-line beats during its earnings call on May 2nd. It reported adjusted earnings of 89 cents per share, beating estimates by 4 cents per share, but still down from 93 cents per share same quarter last year. Overall revenues were $1.05 billion, which was up 1.6% from the $1.03 billion reported this time last year, and it was better than the consensus estimate of $1.01 billion for the quarter. There was a lot in that report, and I'm working on that story right now for FSI readers for next week. But I wanted to give you the heads up on the earnings because one of the really interesting comments in the earnings was about the recent settlement between SCI and the state of California. The state of California had sued SCI for illegal, untoward, icky, I don't know, that for practices that they deemed unfit. And that is why it's hard to talk about. So SCI agreed to pay $23 million in a civil penalty. It did not acknowledge any wrongdoing, and even in the earnings report, the SEO Tom Ryan was talking about how California has different laws for funeral service than every place else, and he suggested it was more of a mistake or a disagreement about how things should be accounted for. This all surrounds their pre-need work and their pre-need work with the Neptune Society and the Trident Society. These suits have been going on for a while. I'm sure you've heard of them before. The lawsuit claimed that SCI misled consumers about trust practices, refund policies, and veterans benefits, particularly with its popular standard plan, which combined cremation services and merchandise into a single price. SCI split the payment according to this. So if you got if you pre-planned and also bought merchandise, those went into two different accounts, and the merchandise was non-refundable. The state of California, among other things, said, well, no, it is refundable, and you're going to have to refund the people who want refunds. There was also some question about whether and how much of an entire pre-need contract that a consumer could take with them if they decided not to do business with the Neptune Society or the Trident Society. For their part, Ryan talked about how it's just an opportunity to get all of their pre-need in order. He talked a lot about SCI Direct, and we'll have a longer report on that. But their focus now is more on SCI Direct, and they feel as if that they have their prepayment their pre-need program well in shape and should be clear in all of the other states. In a little bit more financial news, Park Lawn has announced its numbers for its second quarter of 2024. Its outstanding debt was reduced by $19.6 million, and debt is lower by $27.2 million. GAAP earnings per share of 29 cents, non-GAAP of 69 cents. 69 cents is better than 65 cents a year ago. There's going to be plenty more to dig into, and this will have to wait for next week as they report their earnings at 9 a.m. on Friday today. So I'm probably listening to it right now, and we will get back to you. Again, check FSI for reporting on that in the coming week. Similarly, Park Lawn on Thursday will release its numbers, and their earnings call is next Friday, May 10th. Stay tuned for that, and we will report on all of those both here and in FSI, the weekly newsletter. Finally, President and CEO of Foundation Partners Group, Kent Robertson, is leaving the company. For now, he'll be replaced by Chris Blackwell as the interim CEO, and Chris will have the support of Bob Bucala, who is the former Foundation Partners CEO and a current board member. Speaking of state-backed lawsuits, the New York Department of Consumer and Worker Protection Commissioner Vilda Vera Mayuga filed a lawsuit on the state's behalf against R.G. Ortiz Funeral Homes Incorporated for allegedly exploiting grieving families through various violations of the city's consumer protection law. The violations include refusing to provide information regarding the whereabouts of loved ones' remains, misrepresenting or concealing service prices, and failing to deliver paid services, often presenting remains in unacceptable conditions. This story, which there's a link in the show notes, it's from the state. It's the state press release. This is not reported, although there are plenty of reports out there. And the details of it are kind of icky. There was a story about a family who was told they had to prepare their grandmother's hair and makeup on their own. There are stories about families being sent into the place where they keep all of the remains and asked to find their own remains. There are families who had to pay to have their loved ones' remains exhumed from the New York Potter's Field, which we've reported on before. It's Davis Island. It's the island off of New York. And because they had not picked the body up from the morgue as they were supposed to. So this is another instance, I think, of a bad actor getting caught. If you are a bad actor, you are going to get caught. If you are a borderline actor, I'd recommend keeping your nose very, very, very clean. The states are really interested in funeral service now. There are more people than ever with their eyes on the processes, and there are so many people who are doing the right things are never going to run afoul of any of the laws or any of their families. But this isn't a good time to take even one shortcut one time, because people are watching and the states are ready to enforce. No one wants to be the next Colorado, where they found out, well, we don't really enforce our laws, and this is the result. We've spoke about green cemeteries before, I think in the very last episode of this, because there seems to be either more coverage or more instances of cemeteries adding green burial. Without judging one way or the other whether it's a good thing or a bad thing, it's certainly worth noticing that some cemeteries are seeing a decline in regular burial, and they're doing what they can to attract the green burials. And I think that the green burials are kind of sparked by all of the publicity around human composting, which, again, I feel like I'm the only one that's reporting on this, is only possible in 2 states. I don't know how many states it's legal in today. It could be 8, it could be 9. But if you want to actually undergo human composting, you have to go to Colorado or you have to go to Washington. But it's constantly covered, and so it's very popular. This latest one I get a kick out of. It is Oakley City, Colorado, and they're proposing a 20-acre parcel for a conservation cemetery. But more than that, it's essentially going to be protected public land where organized burial occurs. And we're working on a feature on that, but for now, it's worth imagining just getting buried in public parks. There's been a lot of mention in the cemetery space about getting people to come back to cemeteries to enjoy them as their parks. And this seems like the flip side of that. So we'll have more on that as the story develops. But it's interesting to see that people are doing it. Every week there are several stories. And another one was in Montague, Massachusetts. people had lobbied for and finally got a green burial cemetery, a green burial section of their cemetery, and they had their grand opening on April 27th, and they had a bunch of people again sign right up to participate in green burial. But what I really want to talk about is, it's going to be tough to say the name, I'm sorry, Quinnesec, which is in Bryarung Township, Michigan, and their Department of Public Works Superintendent Jay Davis enacted or had the town enact a green burial ban, meaning that green burials would not be allowed in the town. No one had asked for green burials in the town. There was no green burial movement in the town. There were no requests for a green cemetery in the town. I guess Jay just wanted to make sure that before anybody went poking their nose around whether he should carve up his cemetery to have an extra section for green burial, the answer is no. He was worried about poisoning the groundwater, which is something that I never get tired of hearing from people who are against burial. And because he was against not having vaults for the same reason, because he believes that formaldehyde from the buried bodies will poison their groundwater, and he's in charge. So they don't have green burial in Quinnesec, but it doesn't matter because no one in Quinnesec wants green burial. I believe that'll do it for this week. If you are listening to the podcast, consider going to our YouTube channel and subscribing. We do videos other than these. Similarly, if you're watching this video on YouTube, I do a podcast every other week that is an interview show. We would love to have you tune in. I think the stories are really good, and people seem to agree. Also want to take a quick mention. We have the Kates-Boylston Funeral Service Business Plan Conference coming up June 4th and 5th in Warwick, Rhode Island. If you go to Kates-Boylston.com, you can get all the information on the upcoming event. I'm going to be there. I'm hosting a panel discussion at the very end. I've been doing interviews with all of the presenters, and I'm very excited for this event. We've had great discussions just in the interview process. I can't imagine what the question and answer sessions are going to be like. The in-between sessions where we're all just kind of hanging out and talking are going to be great. So Warwick, Rhode Island, June 4th and 5th. You can check that out on Kates-Boylston.com. Click on events. Funeral Service Insider, the podcast, in case you missed it, as a Kates-Boylston production. It was written and edited by me, Tony Russo, and thank you so much for joining us. We will see you next week.